go, Phil? All right, Aaron, here we go. Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're joined by Aaron Silverstein with the California Cannabis Beverage Association. Aaron, how's it going? And thanks for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for having me. Always happy to come on and talk about the association.
Yeah, something new out there, huh? Drinking cannabis. Can you kind of, I guess, tell us a little bit about the association, kind of how you got started with it?
So the association really started about 2 years back, I would say. I was one of the founding members. I got pulled in by Mikhail Polanski and David Quintana, who really were the visionaries behind this. They saw a need for beverages to really be represented in California, in the capital. It is a new category, like you're saying. Not a lot of people have even necessarily heard of cannabis beverages.
Right.
But if you read a lot of the headlines, especially stuff coming out of Canada for the last couple of years with Canopy Growth and Constellation, some companies like that, there's a lot of money riding on this being the future of cannabis, I would say. Not just money, but a lot of people like myself are also staking their careers on it. It's something we're all pretty excited about. We think is the most novel way to consume, but we found that it needed a lot of representation in the state because people drawing up regulations and laws about cannabis who had never heard of beverages before just weren't thinking about it.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of what was your, I guess, relationship? Were you policy focused, or were you in the cannabis industry, I guess, prior to kind of joining the association?
So it's very funny. I was actually a winemaker.
Oh wow!
And just by kind of happenstance, I ended up being the go-to person for anyone who wanted to make a cannabis-infused wine. They were really coming to me for help. So I ended up working with a number of different people. And then after seeing the challenges they were going through trying to bring products to market, because the regulations around beverage are just how they would impact beverages, I got very passionate about it. And that's why I helped found the CBA and really became a large part of it, to advocate for change in Sacramento and just to make sure that these products are being thought about with regulations.
It's interesting, you're just seeing the beverage market change so much now with all these seltzers and all these kind of water companies that are now alcohol companies, kind of with this kind of low calorie, kind of alcoholic drinks. You can see kind of a similar revolution kind of coming with the cannabis beverage what's the scene of cannabis beverages right now, and kind of what kind of options do you have?
So it's amazing. It's radically different than it was 2 years ago. And you have a lot of options right now. So you have cannabis infused wines that they're made from wine, but they're actually de-alkalized. So someone's taking the alcohol out of the wine, then infusing it with cannabis. So you get to enjoy that kind of adult flavor profile, as well as cut all the calories.
Right.
And get a kind of a high instead of a drunk, which I happen to think is very cool. There's a number of seltzers on the market. Some people are doing fruit juice beverages. You're also seeing more traditional sodas, your colas, your root beers, a lot of things in that vein. Just like beverage in the real world, the diversity is just going to keep growing.
Is there, I remember in Colorado, there was like some testing on this, but I guess mixing alcohol with kind of cannabis, is that something that's going on now? Or is it strictly just your drink is either alcoholic or it's strictly cannabis? There's no mixing the two. What's the kind of...
So right now there's absolutely no mixing. From a regulatory perspective, there's no way to make that happen. Whether or not it's actually desirable or good for you is a whole nother question. But right now, just straight up from the regulatory perspective, any kind of alcohol license, you're going to need a federal license from the TTB, who's not going to grant you anything if you've got a cannabis premise,
right?
In the same site. So the ability to mix those during production is really just completely non-existent until there is federal legalization of any kind. Then it's a question, but my gut tells me no, I don't think there's ever really going to be a mixing.
Yeah. So right now, if you want to try one of these cannabis beverages, kind of where do you have to go to buy one of these kind of drinks? Can you go to a store? Can you go to a liquor store? Do you actually have to go to a dispensary?
So you've got to go to a dispensary right now. It's really the only way to purchase them. And it's been something that's very interesting for us as a category, because what we found is a lot of the customer base that we're targeting, especially newer consumers to cannabis, who, great, maybe you haven't had a joint in 20 years, maybe you've never had cannabis before. So the idea of consuming this in a format where you're used to consuming intoxicating substances and where we can have onsets that are actually really similar to alcohol, where we're going that, 15 to 20 minute onset, off hour to hour and a half. So it gives consumers a way to kind of dose themselves. So it's perfect for that new consumer, but we've actually found they don't necessarily like going into dispensaries or feel comfortable doing so, especially sometimes in more kind of legacy markets. So direct to consumer has also been a big channel. That is, of course, actually going through licensed retail channels and then doing delivery through there. But the ability for a consumer to purchase it through a website instead of having to go physically in the store seems to make a big difference for beverage sales, as something we're seeing for that reason.
Right. I guess, are there different, types and concentrations of beverages, like, one with, I guess a higher concentration of THC, or is there some with CBD that, maybe, health folks might look for? Or kind of what are the variations and concentrations of the beverages out there?
So really, they're all over the board right now. You have things as low as, going through dispensaries, your microdose beverages. So great examples are CANN, and Wonder's another one. They both make great products. They're very nicely flavored seltzers. And they're both targeting, I believe, around 2.5 milligrams per can. So that's that microdose part of the market. And a lot of it, which, I very much think is the future of this category, is that ability to be sessionable. So being able to have more than one can in a sitting, especially for a beverage product, if I'm buying and drinking beer, I don't have a single can a night and then just, that's it. But a lot of people, it's very interesting, the consumer behavior right now in cannabis, both on the consumer side as well as buyers at dispensaries. There's a lot of kind of fixation on almost that unit or single serving being that entire dose. And that's sort of how a lot of the thinking on, whether or not this is a fair price or something I want to buy is all kind of focused there, which is very interesting. It's a shift from the rest of beverage, but something that I think as this market matures, we're going to see it kind of going the way that people think about alcohol.
Oh, just kind of like, I guess what, if you went out with some friends and, you had some drinks, there's a good chance you're not going to be feeling too well the next morning. Is that going to be an issue with a cannabis infused beverage? Is a hangover guaranteed, or, are there, kind of no effect kind of once it wears off?
Just like any other form of cannabis, there's, once that wears off, there's not really an effect. One of the very nice things too about beverage specifically, and it's not something I necessarily know enough about since I'm not, a biochemist or anything along those lines, or a medical doctor by any means. But what's absolutely fascinating is, so, when you smoke a joint, or if you're hitting a bong, you're combusting something, there's all kinds of variables with how that's actually combusting, how much is decarboxylating, how much you're actually absorbing in your lungs, like how do you measure a puff of a joint? So kind of the experience and what you expect you're going to get from something is going to vary a lot. The way the beverages are being produced right now, that's so amazing. So they work, it's something really new to the cannabis market, because they don't work like traditional edibles, which you would consume them, the active compound goes into your stomach, right? Then it goes through the portal vein into your liver, where it's then actually metabolized into a much stronger compound. And how long that's going to affect you actually varies, on your biology. How much enzyme do you have in your liver for whatever specific enzyme that is, things like that. But what happens with these is it takes that very small dose of cannabis, and because of the way it's actually infused into the beverage, that can just go right into your bloodstream. It skips that entire pathway. So it's actually very consistent, which is fantastic for people. That's what enables it to have the fast onset and the fast offset, but it also helps ensure that it's not going to build up in your system either.
Right.
So I might skip smoking one night if I'm going to have a gummy, but I'm having that in the evening. Depending on how much I have, I might still be high in the morning for work too. So one of the really nice things about beverage is it really it skips that problem, whether it's a hangover or maybe a still high over, whatever you'd like to call it. But you're always going to have kind of that consistent, reliable experience, which personally I think is fantastic.
Right. You know, I know you guys were doing something in the legislature this year. Can you kind of tell us kind of what legislation you guys got passed and kind of when's it going to take effect?
I would be happy to. So the advocate who we're working with, who I mentioned before, David Quintana, who's absolutely fantastic guy, and he really did a lot of work and spearheaded this for us. But he got a bill going that then got signed into law called AB 1222. And it's addressing something that from a beverage perspective is kind of one of the most ridiculous things you ever heard of. But ever since recreational cannabis started, we weren't allowed to use glass of any color except brown. Had to be like a brown beer bottle, even if no matter what you were packaging in there. Which I know for a lot of people, especially going into wine formats or doing sodas, either that glass color was hard to find or just really didn't look appealing to the customer. We saw people doing all kinds of crazy things, even painting their bottles, for example, to just make it opaque and kind of have it look decent, but get through that requirement. So the bill that was passed was really so simple as it just let us use glass of any color or transparency. So it was, for something so simple, that was a big win for us. It's kind of nice to just have our foot in the door, right, and get started with a couple changes we'd like to make. But it's the example of when no one's thinking about beverage at all, and they're thinking about, often reasonable concerns. Like, how do I have someone who's manufacturing brownies package that, but have it not appeal to children? I don't want them to be able to see the brownie, right?
Right.
But then, just like the entire alcohol market, whether your vodka bottle is clear glass, purple or brown, doesn't seem to matter or affect its appeal to anyone. So it's not really a sensible regulation for us to have to face with beverage.
Right. And I guess I guess some future things you guys are working on, is it conceivable to see that maybe cannabis beverages might be for sale at a grocery store or 7-Eleven in a few years?
I think there's a question of how long. It's something that I think long-term in the future, we are going to see, especially with that kind of low dose segment. There might even be a much smaller limit than what you're going to see going through recreational dispensaries. Kind of the same way you'll see a lot of states, I mean, even California, for example, right? You've got different levels of alcohol licensing. It's a lot easier to sell beer and wine than it is to sell spirits.
Right.
I expect that I think in the future with cannabis and a format like beverage, we will see something like that. That might be 10, 15 years down the road. But I do kind of see that being the future.
Yeah. And I guess kind of what's your association kind of hoping to accomplish next year? And what are you guys currently working on?
A lot of different stuff. We've actually got a cleanup item going with that bill, where part of the goal is we were able to, over the last year, get that passed. That was only affecting glass items. So kind of as silly as it is, all right, we got to add PET and plastic and sort of protect the overall category there and continue to give people options other than glass, anything that might be better for recycling, things like that. Some items that we'd like to do, I'm not quite sure if we'll be able to get to in the next year, actually have a lot to do with recycling. Right now, some of the requirements, at least the details on the child-resistant caps and making them resealable to some extent, makes the entire package pretty often unrecyclable. There are little plastic sliding lids that you see people put on cans. If you ever have a cannabis beverage in a can format, that pretty much makes the entire package unrecyclable, which is just such a kind of wasteful and silly thing to do, as well as just it adds a lot of cost to the product too,
Right.
for not much benefit for the consumer.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, I guess in some respects, it's no different than alcoholic beverage, which is in grocery stores everywhere, just as marketable and easy to get to. Kind of why do you think there is this extra added kind of level of security for cannabis beverages versus alcoholic beverages?
I think it's just the nature of repealing prohibition. When we repealed prohibition for alcohol, that was a very different story because alcohol was kind of, it was legal for a very long time. Then it was a short period of time where it was illegal. So they were sort of built upon standards here. It did make sense when you're regulating cannabis and legalizing it to be more restrictive than, deregulate too much.
Right.
It's something through the work we're doing, which isn't necessarily easy, we can make changes. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad way to go about it, but some of those changes can, I think, be very difficult to make. I mean, even with alcohol, you see really interesting things in different states. There's a lot of states you can't buy alcohol on a Sunday still. Right. There's, whether or not that's actually enforced might be a different question, but there's all kinds of laws and holdovers that I'm sure in cannabis, we're still going to see the same things.
Right. So if some of our listeners are, I guess, interested in trying some of these, I guess, cannabis beverages, are there kind of certain brands or something you can kind of steer us to? So when you go to a dispensary and kind of look for this stuff, we kind of know what to look for and what to try?
Definitely. I've got to highly recommend that you try House of Saka. That might also be because that's my day job producing that, so I might be a little biased, but I do highly recommend it. We do a fantastic product called Saka Spark that it's actually a single serve mimosa. Personally, I think it tastes better, even better than an actual mimosa. I think everyone adds too much orange juice to them. So right. Highly recommend trying that. I think it's a fantastic product, really refreshing. That's on that lower end, 5 milligrams. So again, it's the kind of thing you can have a couple throughout the day, which is a really nice way to consume and enjoy these products. I also highly recommend trying Wonder, which is kind of like the new seltzer on the block. I think they've been doing a fantastic job with the products and keeping quality up. Kaizen makes some wonderful beverages. There's a lot out there, and the category just keeps getting more diverse. So check out your local dispensary.
Does every dispensary have a beverage section? Are there certain ones that do or don't? Kind of, I guess, how do you know where to locate the products? And so we're just not, I guess, wandering aimlessly into dispensaries.
No, that's a wonderful question. I would recommend using Weed Maps or a similar service because it can be very geographical where different products are stocked and how they have distribution, since distribution in the cannabis market is really fractured and geographic, I would say. Mm-hmm. But I would just say check it out online. And it's been an interesting change because we went from a very small amount of dispensaries stocking beverages to now I would say more than half the dispensaries in California stocking beverages. And that number continues to grow, and they are slotting more and more space for it. It's been fascinating because they just didn't really build out to have the space to store beverages. You have all the product in a dispensary, right? That's not on display, sometimes fitting into just like a really tiny closet. Right. So all of a sudden you get a big bulky thing like a couple cases of beverages, and that's my 36 units are taking up half of my closet versus 36 units normally taking up barely a shelf. It's a massive change.
Right. And I guess what is the current, I guess, status of the beverage market, the cannabis beverage market today versus, I guess, a few years ago?
So by dollar share, I'd say we've remained fairly constant, which isn't a bad thing considering all the price compression that's been going on. Rising slightly. So we're about 2% of the market in terms of just dollar share. In terms of just units sold, I think we're a bit above that at around 2.5%, maybe a little bit more than that. And we're actually at a faster growth rate for sure than the overall cannabis market right now. Got to double check where we are, but I believe it's about 5x.
Wow.
So that is pretty significant. And that's just all beverages combined is at that. But certain categories that it makes sense to be faster because they're a larger proportion, let's say, of just what you're going to buy at a 7-Eleven. So sparkling beverages, that's growing at almost twice that speed again. So I believe about 10x the regular market.
Yeah,
It's
and
pretty fantastic.
And I guess, is there any hope to get into, I guess, restaurants or nightclubs, things like that? If there's some sort of, I guess, secondary resale kind of ability out there right now, or maybe in the future?
Right now, there's definitely no way for a bar or a nightclub to resell the product in any fashion that would be compliant, for sure, especially if you have an alcohol license. That's just really not going to fly with anyone. It is interesting, on-premise consumption continues to develop, and that's been a very slow process. I would say a lot of the regulators on a county level and city level have been very hesitant with that. So that has definitely taken a lot of time, and there aren't very many places like that that are available, but it's something that we do see as being very significant for the category.
Interesting. And I guess for, this seems like you're on the, ground floor of something that's going to be really big in maybe 10 years. I guess, are there any like big public companies that are coming into this space, or is it pretty much kind of small distillers, small businesses kind of currently right now?
A lot of the early movers right now have been the smaller players who have positioned themselves in the space, which is really exciting and cool to see. It is something I think you're going to see the space even bigger faster than that. Within the next 3 to 5 years, I think in a market like California, we're going to be 15% of the overall market, something around there, and that the pace of growth is just going to continue to pick up. But you are seeing very big companies have placed massive bets on it.
Yeah.
So Constellation, the Constellation Brands, the very large wine company, as well as they've got some spirits and beer holdings as well. They invested into canopy growth in Canada. A lot of that is speculative based on cannabis beverages, and that being, a future way for alcohol companies to grow. We're seeing the same thing from AB InBev, the producer of Budweiser, partnering with Tilray in Canada. We saw Molson Coors, another massive beer company, partnering with Hexo in Canada and making, I believe the partnership is called Truss. There's others I'm missing, but all the large regional beer players I know of are investigating, looking at this and how to get into it. We're seeing the larger existing cannabis companies already in markets like California looking at now how to make plays and get into it if they haven't already. So it seems to be on everyone's minds. Every conversation I've ever had with an MSO in the last month or 2 months, beverage is front and center focus.
Right. Because
it's such a fast growing thing where they want to get some part of that market before it's too late, and they're going to have to fight someone else and just throw branding dollars at it. Right. But now it's like you're saying, it's so nascent that tiny startups can just roll out and start building their brands.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so exciting. So it's the Wild West, and you're here in the beginning of the gold rush. So it's an exciting kind of new spot, and glad you could come on and kind of share kind of your story with us and the association, and look forward to trying some of these.
Well, you'll just have to let me know where I can send some, and I'll get some coming your way.
Definitely, we might have to have you in live here pretty soon. We can do a in studio taste test. So
I would absolutely love to do that. I could bring a whole bunch of different brands for you to try.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and thanks for joining us. And hope to catch up with you later on. See what you guys are up to next year.
That sounds fantastic. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Aaron. Have a good one.